Sometimes the sweetest victories come after years of being underestimated. I'm Michael Zhang, and this is the story of how I went from being the useless son to the majority owner of our family's $100 million business empire. Our family business, Zhang Enterprises, wasn't always an empire. My father started with a single electronics store in 1985, shortly after immigrating from China. Through relentless work and strategic expansion, he built it into a chain of high-end electronics stores across 3 states. By the time I was born, we were comfortable. By the time I finished high school, we were wealthy. My older brother, Richard, was always the golden child. He had our father's aggressive business instincts and our mother's charm, while I was quiet and analytical, spending hours studying market trends and business models. Richard was out making deals and commanding attention. "Your brother understands business," Dad would say. "He has the Zhang spirit. You're too soft." What they didn't realize was that I saw business differently. While Richard focused on flashy deals and rapid expansion, I noticed the inefficiencies in our operations, the opportunities being missed, the risks being ignored. I tried telling Dad about my concerns when I was 19. "Our inventory management system is outdated," I explained, showing him the analysis I'd done. "We're losing millions in potential profits." He barely glanced at my carefully prepared report. "Leave the business to those who understand it," he dismissed. "Focus on your studies." So I did. I earned degrees in business administration and computer science, graduating summa cum laude while working part-time in our smallest store. Richard, meanwhile, was already a vice president, making splashy acquisitions that got his picture in the business papers. After graduation, I asked to join the company's management team. Richard laughed during the family dinner where I made my request. "You, in management? You can barely talk to customers." Mom tried to be diplomatic. "Perhaps you could start in HR? Something quieter?" "The tech department needs a new junior analyst," Dad suggested. "That might suit your abilities." I accepted the position, but I had a plan. While Richard was making headlines with aggressive expansions, I was quietly learning every aspect of our business. I documented the inefficiencies, the waste, the outdated systems that were costing us millions. More importantly, I started buying shares. Every bonus, every bit of my salary I could spare went into purchasing company stock. Most was available on the open market. Dad had taken the company public years ago, though our family retained majority control, or so they thought. Richard's expansion plans were causing problems. His acquisitions were flashy but overpriced. Our debt was mounting, and our core business was suffering from neglect. During board meetings, I tried raising concerns. Richard always shut me down. "Leave the real business to real businessmen," he'd say. "Go back to your computers." Then came the crisis. One of Richard's biggest acquisitions turned out to be a disaster. The company he'd bought for $50 million was worth barely half that. Our stock price plummeted. Dad called an emergency shareholders meeting. The boardroom was packed with investors, board members, and family. Richard stood at the podium, trying to defend his decisions. I sat quietly, reviewing the documents in my briefcase one last time. 10 years of careful planning was about to pay off. "We need to vote on new leadership," one board member suggested. "These mistakes have cost us dearly." Richard's face turned red. "Mistakes? I built this company." "Well, Dad and I did." He shot me a contemptuous look. "While some people hide behind computers, real leaders take risks." Dad nodded in agreement. "My son has made this company what it is." "Which son?" I asked quietly. The room went silent. I never spoke up in these meetings. Richard sneered. "The son who matters. The one who's dedicated his life to this company, not playing with spreadsheets in the IT department." I stood up slowly. "Let's talk about dedication." "You're a disgrace," Richard yelled. "You've never contributed anything to this company. You're just jealous of my success." I opened my briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. "Actually, let's review some numbers." "We don't have time for your technical nonsense," Richard dismissed. "Make time," I said, my voice carrying an authority that made several board members sit up straighter. "Because according to these documents, I own 51% of Zhang Enterprises." The boardroom erupted in chaos. Richard lunged for my documents. Dad stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "Impossible," Richard shouted. "The family controls the majority shares." "The family does," I agreed calmly. "Just not the family members you thought." I started distributing copies of my ownership documentation. Over the past 10 years, I've been quietly purchasing shares. When Richard's mismanagement caused the stock price to drop, I bought even more. As of last week's market close, I own 51% of all outstanding shares. Dad's face had gone pale. Michael, why didn't you tell us? Would you have listened? I asked simply. When have you ever listened to me? The board members were reviewing my documents with growing excitement. Our company's largest institutional investor, Mrs. Chen, smiled knowingly. She'd known about my purchases. In fact, she'd helped facilitate many of them. This is a trick, Richard blustered. Some IT department scheme. It's all legal and verified. Mrs. Chen interrupted. I've been watching Mr. Zhang's strategic acquisitions of company stock for years. Quite impressive. But, Richard stammered. Let me make this simple, I said, standing at the podium Richard had vacated. As majority shareholder, I'm calling for an immediate vote on company leadership. The next hour was a blur of procedural motions and votes. When the dust settled, I was CEO of Zhang Enterprises. Richard was removed from all operational roles, though I allowed him to keep his board seat. Family is still family, after all. Dad sat in stunned silence throughout the proceedings. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, though whether from shame or pride, I couldn't tell. As the boardroom emptied, Richard finally found his voice again. You can't do this. You don't know how to run a company. I pulled out another folder. Actually, I do. This is my plan for the next 5 years. While you were making headlines with overpriced acquisitions, I was developing strategies to modernize our operations, optimize our supply chain, and expand into e-commerce. E-commerce? Dad scoffed. Our customers want personal service. Our customers want convenience and competitive prices. I corrected. Something our competitors are already offering. We're losing market share every quarter because we've failed to adapt. I projected my analysis onto the boardroom screen. These are the efficiency improvements I implemented just in my department. They saved us $3 million last year alone. Imagine what we can do company-wide. The remaining board members leaned forward, suddenly very interested in the quiet son's ideas. Furthermore, I continued, I've developed partnerships with key technology providers. We can modernize our entire operation within 18 months. Mrs. Chen nodded approvingly. This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we've been hoping to see. Richard slumped in his chair, defeated. Dad stared at my presentation, seeing for the first time what he'd been dismissing all these years. The next few months were challenging. Change is never easy, especially in a family business. Some longtime employees resigned rather than adapt to new systems. Richard tried to undermine my authority several times before finally accepting reality. But the results spoke for themselves. Within 6 months, our e-commerce platform was generating 30% of total revenue. Our modernized inventory system cut waste by 40%. The stock price recovered and then soared to new highs. Dad started attending my strategy meetings, quietly taking notes. One evening, he stayed behind after everyone else had left. I was wrong, he said simply, about everything. I waited, letting him find his words. I thought business was about big moves, aggressive deals, like Richard, like I used to be. He smiled sadly. But you saw the future while we were stuck in the past. The future is about working smarter, not just harder, I replied, something I tried to tell you 10 years ago. He winced at the reminder. Your mother and I, we owe you an apology, many apologies. You don't owe me anything, I said, everything I am, even my approach to business, I learned from you. You taught me persistence, attention to detail, the importance of understanding every aspect of an operation. You just didn't realize you were teaching those lessons. Tears formed in his eyes, something I'd never seen before. You're a better businessman than I ever was. Different, I corrected, not better. You built something amazing from nothing. I'm just helping it evolve. Richard took longer to come around. The day after the shareholder meeting, he cleared out his office, dramatically announcing he would start his own company to compete with us. 3 years later, his venture was failing. He'd made the same mistakes, flashy deals, poor operational control, resistance to technology. When he finally swallowed his pride and came to my office, I was ready. Come to gloat? He asked bitterly. No, I replied, pushing a folder across my desk. Come to offer you a job. He opened the folder suspiciously. Inside was a proposal for a new division of Zhang Enterprises, one that would focus on the high-touch, relationship-based business model he excelled at. I don't understand, he said, after everything. You're still my brother, I said simply, and you have skills this company needs. Your personal approach to business, your ability to build relationships, those are valuable. They just need to be properly focused and supported by modern systems. You're offering me a chance to come back? Just like that? Not just like that. You'll report to the board, not directly to me. Your budget will be strictly controlled, and you'll need to complete our new management training program, including the technology components. He stared at the proposal for a long time. Why? Because despite everything, your family, and because I believe people can change when they're shown a better way. He signed the contract that day. It wasn't always smooth, old habits die hard, but over time, Richard learned to combine his relationship-building skills with modern business practices. The division he runs is now one of our most profitable. Mom took longer to adjust to the new reality. She'd always seen me as her quiet, bookish son who needed protection. Watching me run a $100 million company challenged everything she'd believed about me. I worry about you, she said one Sunday during our weekly family dinner. All this responsibility. Mom, I interrupted gently. I've been handling responsibility since I was 19. You just didn't see it. She looked at me then, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time. No, she said softly, we didn't see a lot of things. The company continues to grow. Our e-commerce platform now serves customers nationwide. We're expanding into artificial intelligence and predictive analytics, things Richard still doesn't fully understand but has learned to trust. Dad semi-retired last year, though he still comes to board meetings. He sits quietly, watching me run the company he built, finally recognizing that his soft son had a strength all his own. Last month, we had another shareholders meeting. I presented our latest results, record profits, expanding market share, strong growth in all divisions. Richard sat in the front row, nodding along with my technology initiatives instead of dismissing them. Afterward, Mrs. Chen pulled me aside. I knew, you know, she said with a smile, all those years ago, when you started buying shares, I knew you saw something others didn't. What was that? I asked. The future, she replied simply, and the patience to wait for it. Yesterday, I found an old photo while cleaning out some files. It showed teenage me trying to explain a computer system to Dad while Richard posed for newspapers in the background. I had it framed and hung it in my office, next to our latest technology awards. The caption reads, "Success isn't always loud." Richard saw it during our last meeting. He stood looking at it for a long time before speaking. You know what's ironic? He said finally, all those years, we thought you were the one who didn't understand business. Turns out we were the ones who didn't understand where business was going. I smiled. The good news is, there's always time to learn. This morning, I called a special board meeting. On the agenda, discussing our 5-year plan for expansion into artificial intelligence and robotics. Richard will present the customer relations component. Dad will share insights from his decades of experience. And I'll lead the technology strategy, not as the quiet son who wasn't good enough, but as the CEO who saw the future and had the patience to wait for everyone else to see it too. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right, even if it takes 10 years and 51% of the company to do it.